Today I'm making Stormtrooper armor. Specifically, I'm making the ISB Assault Trooper from Andor Season 2. For this build, I used EVA foam, craft foam, coffee foam, putty, super glue, hot glue, cutting tools, sanding tools, safety gear, scissors, razor pens, and a box cutter. First, I figured out a flat template and traced it onto white foam floor mats. These patterns will be linked in the video description down below, but I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. This armor is structurally very similar to the Juggernaut driver armor. So to all my followers, if you've seen that video that I put out a little while ago and already picked up those templates, you can just reuse those on white foam instead of gray. But maybe pay close attention to the parts of this video that are unique to this trooper, because it's like same, and then once we get to the arms and legs, it's a little different. Plus there's the hat. The most complicated part of the build, unless you know how to sew. But for my purposes, I don't want to just keep repainting my armor. I actually like my Shore Trooper armor, plus I want all the variants. So this time I started from scratch, and after tracing the template, I cut those out with the work knife, which I continually sharpened in order to keep the cut clean and uniform. Next, I heat formed it in the middle, and then, when it was sufficiently heated up, I simply folded it in half in the front at the bridge and held it in place until it cooled. Then I heat formed the shoulders and the sides in exactly the same way. Next, I made the panel on the front of the chest plate. I cut that out at a slanted angle so that the edge would match up seamlessly with the now three-dimensionally angled main plate. There's an angled slot at the bottom left, stage left, reminiscent of a coin return slot, so I made that by cutting a rectangle, but leaving the bottom length side attached. Then I flipped it over and cut an angled trench in the back along that length so that the section could be angled inward without any kind of resistance. I super glued it to the main chest armor plate before proceeding. Now that the plate was firmly in place, I secured the angled slot using hot glue. I can get away with hot glue here because this is a cosmetic seam. It's not structural. I added a few small details to the slot and then made the external armor detail. Then I made the collarbone piece and installed it. Afterwards, I made an internal rib to keep the armor from bowing outwards. I ended up refining that one a little bit later, just so that it was more comfortable to wear. That's the variable part of this armor. It's one size fits all, but don't be afraid to, trim it here and there. Then I made the straps out of 3mm roll foam, but 4 is fine. I don't even know how I ended up with 3mm. I used 2mm rectangular foam sections to make the grip pattern on top of it. Then I made the buckles out of 2mm craft foam, 4mm craft foam, dowel foam, and bevel foam, most of which can be found in craft stores. Then I attached them to the straps and attached the straps to the chest plate. Next, I got to work on the back panel. I made it in essentially the same way as the front panel, but since it's less horseshoe shaped, it was a lot easier to work with as its line of symmetry is more centered. I cut darts in the top and the bottom though, just to make it a bit more rounded. Then I heat formed the heck out of it. To make it a little bit easier, I only did one flank at a time. It's just a lot of surface area to work with, and it's so much easier to do it in halves. Once both sides were rounded, I glued the darts together with super glue. There's a detail box on the back, so I got to work on that. I cut the edge of the wall to be curved so that it would sit correctly on the now curved back plate. Then I cut the walls of the pack. Unlike the classic Stormtrooper, these walls are taller than they are wide, rectangular if you will. I cut holes in the top piece and then refined them with my rotary tool. Then I glued the sides together. Next, I cut a panel to close up the back of the box. This is probably gonna look familiar because it shows up in a lot of Stormtrooper variants. It has several cutouts, 2 of which are identical, so I saved the offcut to make the other one. Actually, I just flipped the template, but the offcuts became useful later on, so I held on to those until right now. I'm using the offcuts to make inserts. They're just slightly pushed in to create depth. As these shapes get smaller, I used a razor pen with a flat blade and a vertical chopping motion, kind of like a drill press, rather than a slicing motion to get into those small angular spaces. I glued them into the panel and then moved up to the main alcoves. I used puzzle strips to give them some depth. I had to use steel blocks to hold them in place while the glue dried, because without heat forming, they want to reform to their original shape. But honestly, heat forming here would just be adding steps, so I skipped it. When the glue dried, I cut off the excess strips and made a backing out of 2mm craft foam. I used the thinner stuff this time around so that it wouldn't press up against the inside of the armor plate. Also gives me the option of putting fans and or ice packs in there, because at summer conventions, even this costume can get pretty hot. Then I flipped it back over and built the vents. I made them by layering strips of 4mm craft foam, and then once they were installed, I moved on to the other details. I used a PVC section for the circular detail. Then I made this radiator detail by drawing vents onto 4mm foam. After that, I made the vertical pipes using bevels, and I used sections of a larger foam half dowel to make a different style of radiator running horizontally. Then I added a white wire from my collection of various lengths of wire. And now that all the details are complete, I flipped it over and cut a notch in the back of the panel. This is so that it would fold at an angle rather than a curve. Then I glued it into the backpack walls. After the hot glue had cooled down, I glued it to the armor plate. Then I attached the back plate to the front plate and added this bit of turtleneck collar that further connects them at the top, in addition to the straps. Have I got to the straps? I built them, I don't think I attached them yet. This is shot all out of order, by the way. Otherwise it would take forever if I was just sitting there waiting for glue to dry before moving on to the next step. Just rearranging it in the editing, that's where you end up losing time. Otherwise I could do this in a day. Now for the arms. The shoulders are actually off of the classic Stormtrooper armor. Again, it's a flat shape that when cut out and heat formed will retain a three-dimensional shape. I glued that seam shut and then covered it with a puzzle strip. The upper arm piece is easier. I think it actually never changes for any of the Stormtrooper variants. It's just who's paying attention to it, you know? It's just a flat piece that I heated up, rolled up, and stuck inside of another tube until it cooled. Then I glued the edges together, again covering the seams with strips of foam, and that was it. It's just a tube. Okay, now the forearms are where this build deviates for this particular trooper. They're angled rather than curved, so I cut those shapes with slanted edges so that when they connect to each other, they'll wrap around the forearm. The shorter side is reversed for the other arm. The right arm is blank, while the left arm has a control panel. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First I need to make straps out of 2mm foam strips, and so many rectangles. I think I burned a whole afternoon just cutting and gluing rectangles, and that's why I don't do live streams. It would be boring as hell. Less for the wrist though, so I attached them after I glued that loop in and knew what the length would be. Otherwise you're just doing unnecessary work. Okay, now I can work on the control panel. It's mostly just foam rectangles. A little bit Fallout inspired. I added some colored pieces and some foam circles as well, and used a foam dowel section for the little tube on the side. Now for the hands. Okay, so I've shown this in other videos. I have these gloves that work well with touchscreens, and I didn't want to ruin them, so rather than gluing the armor to the gloves, I sewed some Velcro on them, and then I just swap out the backhand armor for each costume. Downside is, I seem to have lost the white Stormtrooper back panels. Don't know where those got off to. So here I am, making them again. Next I made a walkie from black and gray foam, 4mm, and some 2mm in there. The antenna's made of wood. I'd even go shorter than that in retrospect. And once it was put together, I just lightly stuck it onto the armor. Now for the shins. First I made some more foam straps, a little bit longer than the forearms to account for the width of the leg muscle. Although I used real buckles this time because there's actually a close-up shot in the show. And yeah, they're just using regular buckles. Again, this is a shape that shows up a lot on trooper variants, but what makes this costume both different and, in my opinion, far more comfortable is that it doesn't include a cylindrical armor piece. It's just the front panel, bit of a kneecap, and then the straps that wrap around the leg. There are also some shoe covers, which honestly, I'm not crazy about, but they're on the costume, so I patterned them out just the same. A little bit of light heat forming and super glue. That's all they need. Now for the hat. I made it out of 4mm craft foam, although if you're competent with the sewing machine, just make it out of fabric. It'll look better with the wrinkles in it anyway. I'm just faster with foam than I am with fabric. Once the walls were heat formed and connected, they make a cone shape. I cut a circle for the top and glued it in with hot glue. Now for the brim. It's just the same process. Oh, I'm just now remembering though, I made one of these years ago for a class project, but instead of using foam, I just cut up an old baseball cap and reconfigured the brim. So, you know, that's another option. It's just, I only have one black baseball cap and I use it, you know? I don't want to sacrifice it to the cosplay gods. The flaps of the hat are comprised of two identical, let's call them finless fish. I heat formed them, but before attaching them, I rounded the edges on my belt sander. Any edge that's going to be visible should be rounded in order to at least attempt to maintain the illusion of fabric. Following that logic, I also cleaned up the hat itself, but this time I used scissors and then refined that with my rotary tool instead. That's just because it's easier for me to see what I'm doing. Then I attached the brim and the flaps to the hat. For the brim I used super glue, and for the flaps I used hot glue. Notice that they cover up the seams. The back flap overlaps the front one a little bit on either side. Then I made a button by cutting and stacking concentric circles. I cut these from silver tinted craft foam so that I don't have to paint. And now for the belts. That's right, there's two of them, because you can never have too many ammo pouches. They're all just stacked rectangles. Oh, look at these squares, making a liar out of me. And there's a couple of belt buckles for the center. I made sure to put belt loops on the back of all of them. And for the hip armor panels, those are super easy. I just cut two large rectangles from a roll of white craft foam and attached belt loops to those as well. I used a white belt for those, while the ammo pouches took a black one. The suit underneath the armor is black as well, and that's pretty much it. Okay, and that's how to cosplay as a fascist air conditioner. Now excuse me while I invade space Poland. What would that be, Enceladus? And that's how to make ISB assault trooper armor. Now beware of robots and nurses. Many Bothans died to make this video possible, so honor their sacrifice by donating now to the Bothan Relief Fund, also known as my Patreon. These videos just wouldn't be possible without the support of my patrons. So if you enjoy these builds, want to see more of them, and want your build request to carry a bit more weight, think about heading on over to the Patreon page, where you can enjoy ad-free early uploads. Anything you can pledge goes towards improving the video quality and shop equipment, as well as allowing me to put together bigger and more exciting projects for you on the channel. Alright, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified of the future uploads, because it's kind of at a totally random schedule. And let me know what other props you'd like to see me make in comments down below. Thanks again, happy crafting, see you later!